Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Les Do Books. You can email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with any questions or comments, or come join our Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club. I'm really excited today because Mallory Lass, one of the amazing reviewers at the Lesbrary, is back. Welcome, Mallory.
Hey, Tara. Thanks for having me again.
So, the holidays are nearly upon us, and you have some fanfic recommendations for me and all of our listeners. Do you want to share a little bit about how you went about choosing stories?
Yeah, I would love to. So I have sort of two categories. One is sort of holiday fun and holiday themed fanfics. And that's, more on the fluffy side, people who are super jazzed about the holidays that are coming up. And then I have another section called holiday avoidance for people who are not super excited about the holidays or have some kind of family issues. It's just generally not a good time for them. So I have kind of more meatier fanfics there that are unrelated to holiday themes that people can kind of escape the world into.
All right, so what do you want to start with?
Well, I'm gonna start with my favorite fandom. Well, favorite ship, I guess, or ship of old. My Law and Order SVU Olivia Alex OTP.
And if anyone doesn't remember what a ship or what an OTP is or any of that stuff, go back to the first episode with Mallory. I'm going to put the link in the show notes because she gives a primer on the whole vocabulary around, or the lexicon of, fanfic.
Yeah, so for people who don't remember, briefly, I met my wife through this fandom. Olivia Alex will always have a place in my heart. Speaking of my wife, she also loves this story. She was just telling me this morning, there's... Okay, so Olivia is the detective, and early seasons when Alex was still on the show, she was definitely more of a butch vibe than she is if you just dropped into that show today. And so a lot of the fics have her more on the pursuing side, and this one kind of flips the script, and Alex is more the aggressor. And she pulls some really sort of erotic moves to get Olivia's attention, which is what my wife was distinctly fangirling about this morning. She was very happy I was talking about this fic. It's called Blue Christmas. A lot of the new fics that I rec are on Archive of Our Own, also known as AO3, but this is on an old fem/specific site, and it's in a couple of different chapter segments, so we have those linked for people in the show notes. But it's by raginhoops. It's 23,000 words, so it's a pretty meaty story, and it centers around the holidays, visiting family, particularly Olivia visiting Alex's family, because Alex's family in the story is, in the show, is very well-to-do. And as many people may know, Olivia's mom has passed, and she's the product of a rape, so her family is sparse. So it's generally a good story, well written, longer, so it's not just one scene, it's sort of over a period of time. This is a workplace romance, which I totally never really clued into until now. I don't know why. I love them, but I never applied a trope to them, but then I just realized yes, it's a workplace romance. And that's part of the kind of will they won't they angst in this story, is they work together, but I would say adjacently. They're not in the same department. Neither of them manage the other one. So it's kind of interesting dynamic, but because Alex is an attorney, there's good reasons why they're being hesitant, but also they're just but we like each other. It's not fair, universe. So so there's that. So yeah, I think it's a great story. Blue Christmas, apparently also, as I recently found out, my wife was telling me there's a lot of stories called Blue Christmas, which is one thing. You could kind of look up titles in AO3, Blue Christmas, you will get a lot of Christmas stories. If you do some filtering, you can get the FF ones. There's an Italia one that my wife quite likes, so I've never listened to the song, but I think I will after this, because I was like, oh, that's a random fun fact. So yeah, that's number one.
I haven't watched that show in forever and ever, but I feel like that's a story that I could pick up anyway and enjoy very, very much.
Yeah, like I think if you're into cops or like even, Katie Williams' Cops and Docs or procedurals, you could get into it. The characters are really well drawn, so you don't really need the background to just understand like detective, attorney.
What is the next one?
Okay, I have to tell you because I only found this, like I've been collecting these for a while, and I only found this week, and I literally am like over the moon about it, only because okay, so it's Harry Potter fandom, for which I have not really dipped my toe in at all. For someone who is a fandom person, it's kind of crazy because it's so massive and so prevalent, and a lot of people's like gateway. But at least my like sort of osmosis understanding of Harry Potter fandom is like a lot of Harry Draco, a lot of whatever, and just ships I was not that interested in, which is totally fine.
Mm.
This is Minerva McGonagall and Poppy Pomfrey. So I just discovered that there's a small corner of the Harry Potter fandom like pretty much devoted to Minerva McGonagall and every other female professor at Hogwarts.
I read one once. I don't even know if it's still up because I know it even kind of squicked the author out a little bit. But she wrote a really, really, really good one. That was Professor McGonagall and Hermione, but not Hermione as a child, for the record. I need to say that. It's very important. But there was still this, like, obviously massive age gap. And that was when I was like, oh, right. Anything can happen in Harry Potter.
Okay, back to the story. So, Holiday Wish is what this story is called. It's by Miss Moreland. And Harry Potter fandom is so long and big and diverse that fics are in every platform. So this fic is actually on LiveJournal, but there is an entry for it in AO3, but it's like archived from another site, which is LiveJournal. It's short, it's under 1,000 words, and it is one of my favorite kind of, I don't know if I would call it a trope or a theme or like more of a device. It's a 5 things fic. So if you listen to the first episode and looked at the show notes, a lot of the fics that I recommended there were 5 things or 5+1 things. Something about that like really resonates with me. And this one is regressive in time. So the first story is actually like whatever, the latest in time, most current, and then the fourth or the second one goes back and earlier and earlier and earlier. So it kind of reminded me of Sarah Waters' Night Watch, if anyone ever read that, where it just like going back in time and suddenly like you're learning more about these characters and their backstory as the story goes on. And so it's short, but like you get little snippets in each time frame, and from where you start and like current relationship to where the origins of their relationship actually start. Like it's so cute, and it surprised me how it was gonna end or how they were gonna sort of navigate from the early days. So I love it. I'm super excited now because I've discovered like a whole treasure trove of Minerva McGonagall fics. Apparently her and Hooch are like a pretty big ship of the Minerva ships, and they call them Kitty Hawk, which is also adorable.
Mm-hmm.
I know. I just was like, oh wow, so like even though I've been in fandom for a million years, you can still tumble down new rabbit holes, and that was kind of exciting.
Yeah.
So that's number 2. It's so fluffy and I mean super adorable. Oh, and the other thing about it that's rad is there's a podfic. So podfics, for people who don't know or don't remember, are recordings of fanfic. So you're listening to a podcast now, you probably will enjoy this sort of newer slice of fandom. And so somebody, Thrice and Done, recorded a podfic of this cute little ficlet. So there's that. It's exciting.
Nice. So what is the next one?
This I received as a recommendation when I put out the call to kind of all my fandom friends, like, what's your favorite Christmas fix? It's in the Ghostbusters movie fandom, the all-female 2016 reboot. It's called Wrapped in Red. I think the author name is Cassiopeia Sara, but I could be wrong on that. So we'll just say that is. You can look in the show notes, and sorry, author, if I butchered your fandom name. It's 1.5k words, so like a little meaty ficlet. I love this movie just because I feel like these actresses took such a brunt of hatred, fandom hatred for like redoing an all-male movie, and I'm a huge fan of Ocean's 8, and I don't think it would have happened without this film, so I'm sort of indebted to them. And so I saw this film come up, and it's Jillian Holtzman. Most people know that character as Holtz, which was played by Kate McKinnon, and Patty Tolan, who is played by Leslie. I just think Les Dog whenever I
know.
see her name. I'm like, what is your last name, Leslie? Anyways, she took the brunt of the stern of and left Twitter for a little while because people were mean, so it's rude. Anyway, this fic is highly schmushy. It's so adorable. Mistletoe features, which is for people who enjoy the novelty of mistletoe. Mistletoe is very prevalent in Christmas fics, as you might imagine. And so it's just really adorable and humorous because, of course, Holtz is a very, like, funny, meant to be funny character. So it kind of hits a lot of happy boxes. And the cool thing about it is this fic was written for a sort of prompt challenge that Rather Embarrassing put on, and the prompt was, all I want for Christmas is this fic-a-thon, and that came from the Mariah Carey song, All I Want for Christmas Is You. And so the only thing with this fic was, or with the challenge, was like, you have to incorporate this lyric somehow in the song, or in your fic. And I thought that's a really fun idea, and so a bunch of people did it. There's a bunch of Supergirl ones, because Rather Embarrassing, I guess, is pretty prevalent in the Supergirl fandom, so a lot of people who were getting a notice about this challenge are from that fandom as well. But there's a few, unique ones, like this Ghostbuster one. So it's pretty cool, and you can find the rest of those fics that were part of that challenge, and if you like that song, sort of an entertaining little journey. I think there's 15 of them, so it's pretty cool.
Cute. So, what's your next one?
The next one is... okay, so this is Person of Interest, the TV show. The title is kind of long. It's called She Sees You When You're Sleeping, She Knows When You're Awake by T Ninja. It's a little over 2k words, and it's rated Gen. If anybody didn't see Person of Interest, I highly, highly recommend it. It's a show where the two main female characters, Root and Samin Shah, had just amazing chemistry and subtext, and the creators saw it, the actresses played it up, and they became a couple in the show, like in the later seasons. It's totally complete, you can stream the whole thing, kind of like Casting Lacey, actually, like Casting Lacey by Elle Spencer played out in real life. And so it's really cute. This Christmas story is cute. So there's an AI called the Machine in this show, which is kind of like the quarterback of the show. The Machine sort of drives a lot of the action, and the whole point of the AI is to warn the sort of ragtag group of people that murders are about to happen, and then their job is to kind of go prevent the murder from happening. There's a lot of shooting and guns and stuff and, fighting. So if the violence of that nature is not your bag, then skip the show. But this fic has none of that, and it's, pretty fluffy and cute. Shaw, as a character, is, really dry humored. So if you love the kind of, witty... I think on TV, maybe, Root and Shaw have the best banter of any... I would say even better than Rizzoli and Isles. Their banter is spot on.
Okay.
And a little bit of the darker variety, right? Like Rosalia Niles is more fluffy, even though still like cops and murder happening in that show, but to me it's a little more of the campy friendly banter, and this is definitely more of the dark world's gonna end, but we're ride or die for each other kind of banter. And Shaw has a personality disorder, and I'm blanking on what it's actually called, but she doesn't feel. So the show did an amazing job of getting them together with someone who is very closed off and doesn't have emotions. But still, like, obviously cares about Root in really interesting ways. So yeah, it's good. It's a really good show. The fic is cute and pretty short. And there's Mistletoe, again.
Yay.
And also Santa, right? Like, Santa and Mistletoe, a mall Santa. So, come on. Like, how many more Christmas boxes can we tick off?
That's adorable.
So adorable. So the next story is one that I was like, oh, should I include it? But I'm such a sucker for age gap and the ship that, like, I had to include it. So this is from the 100 fandom. It's called Singles Night at the ER by Keziah. It's 3.8k words. And it's Abby Griffin, Raven Reyes, also known as Dr. Mechanic, the ship of my heart. It's a very tiny ship and like a megalithic fandom. So there are a lot of Christmas fics, but this is like maybe the only one for this ship that's like specifically around Christmas. And it was actually from a Dr. Mechanic prompt fest. So the prompt was Dr. Mechanic on Christmas Eve. It's modern AU, so the show is set in the future, and this is sort of like set in the present. And as I said, it's an age gap. So for people who aren't familiar with the show, Abby Griffin is the older woman. She's a doctor. Raven Reyes is a engineer, mechanic, STEM extraordinaire. She codes, and she kind of does anything and everything. She's like Jill of all trades when it comes to like science and techie stuff. And this is just super fluffy. It's a fade to black, so for people who love that aspect, it's set in Christmas Eve, and the prompt was, Raven goes to the ER and Abby's working. So I just found it sweet and cute and enjoyable. Plus, ship of my heart, so had to do it. The last one I'm kind of excited about because I haven't read it, and I know that sounds kind of crazy, but I want to do like a read along. So I'm going to read it, hope the readers read it, and then they can chat me on Twitter. We can all, enjoy it together. I received this rec from multiple people, and it's a Rosalia Niles fandom. So, Rosalia Niles, it's called Marmite and Mistletoe by Arcadia Arden, and it's 155,000 words. So it's like a meaty, long story. Because of that, and the author notes say, like, it's not, fluffy. But Christmas, given the name, a mistletoe appearance again, Christmas features predominantly, and a couple people told me it's their favorite Christmas fic. So I'm excited to read it. I haven't read much in the Rosalia fandom, and I hope that people will read it and we can chat about it.
Alright, that's pretty exciting.
I mean, you read it, we'll chat about it. If nothing else, we'll be.
I haven't seen the show, so I don't know if that matters.
I don't really think it matters. I mean, I didn't watch the whole thing. This fic is apparently set in things that happen in season 5, which the author was, like, pretty clear about. Like, they both have background relationships with men, so I'm assuming that factors in, or she wouldn't mention it in the notes. So maybe there's some, like, bisexual workings out. I don't know. I will read it and we can update people, or they can just Twitter me. But I know there's tons of Rizzoli people, so
yeah,
not totally out on a limb here with like a random fandom.
No.
You're listening to The Lesbian Talk Show. TheLesbianTalkShow.com, your hub of podcast information.
Okay, so how about your holiday avoidance stories?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the year, holidays are either super exciting or highly stress-inducing. I know a lot of close friends of mine have people who've passed away during the holidays, and sometimes it's just a really hard time of year, which I really sympathize with. And for me, like, the thing that got me back into fandom was, like, Trump getting elected and just, like, being super depressed and wanting to go to a happy place and get comforted. And so, no matter, like, the content of the fic, really, fandom was that kind of outlet. So I figured, what better than some really, like, meaty fics that you can get into and, like, just read and shut out the world. Although, the first thing that I want to chat briefly about is this fan video. It's short, it's like 4 minutes, but it's a video that was specifically made as part of an auction item in Fandom Trumps Hate, and the video features tons of fandoms, like 75 different fandoms, and it's all about characters of color and them being awesome in science fiction, fantasy, and horror TV shows and movies. So to me, like, I've seen this video, I don't know, probably 20 times. Like, whenever I'm having a bad day, I'll just, like, pull it up on YouTube and watch it. Because the music is amazing. It's set to a Sia song called Don't Give Up, which is a pretty good message, like, don't give up. And the cuts, the video quality, like, everything is amazingly good. If you've never seen a fan vid, this might ruin you for other fan vids because it's so well done. There's so many characters and cuts, but it's so smooth. Like, it's just really, really good. And it is so uplifting. And one of my favorite little ships that could is an FF ship from Timeless, which is not a main ship by any means, but they're in the video, and that really makes me happy, especially since that show got canceled. And now they're doing, like, a finale movie, I guess. Mm-hmm. But we will not get, there's one less gay woman on TV now because that show's off, so.
Yeah.
Anyways, there is a content warning, so if someone has issues with people being beheaded, it's a zombie. I think it's from one of those shows that I don't watch. Mm-hmm. But it's very brief. There's a timestamp in the notes if that's unsettling for you. Maybe just jump ahead because it's still worth watching even if you skip the first 25 seconds. And I honestly didn't really recognize that it happened. Like, it's really quick, but then I was, writing all this up and I was like, oh, that might be unsettling for somebody. I should point that out. But it's very, like, a second of the footage, so.
Yeah.
Skip it if you don't want it, but I can't recommend that video to enough people, especially if you're in a bad mood.
It's a great video. I watched it this morning because you recommended it, and I mean, I was surprised about the zombie. I'm not into zombie stuff, but like you said, it's only a second, so it's not that bad.
Sorry. I forgot to warn you about it.
That's okay. So what is that's your first recommendation. What's your first story recommendation?
Okay, my first fic is actually one that I read last holiday season. I had some time off from work, and every time I recommend this story to people, I just say, like, prepare to be, like, glued to your device. However you're reading, like, it will suck you in, and you're just not going to stop reading it. So that is my warning about a time suck, because it's really well written. This is from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's Maria Hill and Natasha Romanoff. But I think it's also Marvel Comics. Like, it's loosely based in Marvel, right? Like, It's an origin story, so knowing the characters is semi-helpful, but literally you could just look them up and then roll with it. Because it's an origin story, you're pretty much getting the backstory of the Black Widow and how she comes to be a member of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then ultimately the Avengers team. So you don't really need to know a ton of Marvel or even care. It's not really superhero-y, if that's a thing that turns you off. Mm-hmm. It's definitely about their relationship. It's long, which is nice. You get a lot of character development, and this pairing is, I don't know, highly hurt comfort. So if that's like a trope or a thing that you really like, it's kind of like the essence of Maria Hill and Natasha Romanoff is her comfort fic is pretty much predominant. There's not a ton of fluff in that fandom, but it's meaty and it's really like easy to get into. For people who don't know, Natasha was brainwashed by the Russians when she was a kid and turned into like a super spy murderer. So she has a lot of post-traumatic stress, and some of the past abuse of her is brought up, and violence in the context of that universe. So if you're familiar with it, you kind of know what to expect. If you're not familiar with it, it's not dominating the story, I don't think, but it is kind of a part of her character, so you can't really escape it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's long, 173,000 words. The other cool thing about it is it was written by two people, Avis Non Grata and Woodface. So each of them wrote one of the characters. So you can't tell when you're reading it, but they like collabed on it where if it's dialogue, it's one or the other. And I don't know how they did like the plot, the narrative form of it. But you really do feel like they're distinctive characters. And if you're kind of like...
Oh, I was just going to say that's so cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And if you're a fandom nerd, they talk about their process a little bit in the comments. The comments of this story are a little wild. There's a lot of people, like they released it as chapters, so there's a lot of people who were reading it as it was getting posted. So some of the comments are overly needy,
mm-hmm.
but then there's some interesting discussions about their process, having read it like way after it got posted.
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of fascinating.
So, what is the next one?
I have a little bonus rec for people who are into Marvel and into this ship. So it's actually a poly ship, but it's all FFF. Maria Hill, Natasha Romanoff, which was what that story was about before. But then this one adds in Pepper Potts. And so it's a pretty short story. It's Women's Weapons by Things with Wings. It's 4.5k words. It is an explicit rated fic, so if that's not your thing, give it a pass. If poly's not your thing, give it a pass. There are 2 podfics made of this story. It's a really good story about them all being really competent at their jobs and like doing a really successful mission that was like a sort of 24-hour period of heightened effort and alert, and then they go relieve their stress by having sex with each other. It's quite nice.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people are into that. It's a very like one-off scenario. So like there's no mention of Pepper and Tony. Like it's not, ruminating on life choices. Like literally it's fun. It's just fun.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's quite good if you're looking for something on the more spicy side. It's very well written, and again, 2 podfics if people are into listening to their stories.
Great. So, what's your next story?
Okay, the next story, not super long. It's only 8,500 words. It's called Some Kind of Madness Has Started to Evolve by the Crack Ship Lollipop. I'm recommending this. It's another Abby Raven Dr. Mechanic 100 fic, but I also have a note because Crack Ship Lollipop writes in a bunch of fandoms, and she writes a lot of Clark Lexa for the 100. So if Dr. Mechanic's not your jam and you love Clexa, go check out her author page and like find some more fics that you might like. But she's a really good writer, which is one of the main reasons I'm recommending this fic, because it's usually not my sort of bent. Like it's an age gap and it's a modern AU, but there's a lot of sort of hand-wringing about the age gap, which is, I think, authors who write age gap choose one way or the other. Like either it's not an issue or it's the main issue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've come across that in both fic and in published lesfic.
I have. And it's something that I think about a lot because age gap is one of my, that's just one of my absolute jams. And
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate when it's addressed, because if it doesn't even come up at all, and we're talking about, I don't even mean just like a 10-year, but if we're getting to like the 15 or 20-year,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes even with the 10-year, like if it doesn't come up, that just doesn't seem realistic, because you're at different points in your lives, you have different priorities.
Yeah.
One published fic that I read recently was London Actually by Claire Lydon, and I thought they did a really good job with that because it's a 23-year-old and a 39-year-old, and
Mm-hmm.
the conversation.
I love that book, by the way.
It's so good, right?
Yeah.
Yay, Claire Lydon. So the thing that I really appreciated about that was not only did they have the conversation, but the 23-year-old, whose name escapes me, she talks about how she's the youngest of 5 and she has like much older siblings, and just like really gets into the, she is mature for her age. So like, yes, she's young, but she's not like a typical 23-year-old. And I just really appreciated that happened. And so I like it when, whether it's in published fic or fanfic, those kind of measured conversations happen, because it is that like, do I want to get into something long term with somebody whose experiences or priorities especially might be wildly different from my own?
Yeah, so I would say, I don't know, for me it depends on the character, and I guess for me there's a difference between like having an intelligent discussion about those challenges versus the characters themselves being squicked by it.
Yes.
Which is kind of this variety a little bit. Like, there's an initial, like, holy crap.
Yeah.
And to warn people, this is a 27-year gap. So, like, this is no... I don't think the gap in the show is... This is a modern AU. I don't think the gap is that big, actually, in the show. It's pretty big, though. Like, it's not a 10-year. Like, it's a legit... essentially, for people who are not familiar, Raven is similar in age to Abby's daughter. Clark, who's the main person in the show, is Abby's daughter, right? So, like, there's that whole, like, well, there's a lot of very funny memes about you sleeping with my mom. I think they're hilarious. Some people have various opinions about it. My personal, in my own life, my age gap with my wife is, like, 16 years. So, I have no qualms about it, but that's kind of the thing. Like, it's good to have intelligent discussion, but if the character's main, like, point is, like, from a standpoint of, like, if it's contrived to get them together is where it kind of, like, really disinterests me.
Are they actually together in the show?
No. This is a total subtext, rare pair situation. And it's really random because there's so much subtext in the first couple of seasons of the show, a little bit in season 3, and then for like reasons of complication on the show, it's like a huge ensemble cast. They really don't interact much in the later seasons.
Okay.
So it's an early show. And actually, Abby gets a canon het pairing. So Kane and Abby become a true canon ship. Which is enemies to lovers for anyone who's interested in that.
But like, what if everything was just gay? What if?
Yeah, right?
Just
what if?
Queer it all.
Yeah. There's some really good Abby Raven Kane fics out there. If you want those, contact me. Generally, like, I will read all of the random poly pairings for all my main ships. A lot of them are like FFF, but sometimes they're FFM, and I'm not gonna, turn down good writing generally, so.
I got it.
Anyways, this is a sort of short story. The reason I liked it is, like, there is some of that, like, consternation, but it's not overwrought, and they get over themselves sort of quickly. Also, Abby plays a surgeon who's, like, a yoga instructor on the side. The other thing I really love about Raven's character is she has a disability in the show, which carries over into this fic. Some people write it in a modern setting with varying degrees, or they completely ignore that she's got a disability in the show. This one's written really well, and the sort of crux of the plot is they're set up on a blind date by Octavia, who's another character in the show, and sort of the blind date itself is a bit of a disaster because of this, like, sort of shock about how old each other is. But then Abby proceeds to help Raven with some yoga moves that will sort of ease some of the pain she's experiencing. She's got a paralyzed leg, and that sort of has some radiating pain problems. So I felt like that piece of it was really good. And it's an explicit fic, so by the end of it, yoga turns into something else.
Does it matter if you've watched the show, or can you read it anyway?
You can totally read it anyways. It's a modern AU, so there's really nothing to do with the show other than its age gap, and one's a doctor, one's a mechanic.
Okay, perfect, because this one sounds exactly like my jam.
Yeah, it's pretty jammy. Like, it's, if you're an age gap fan, I mean...
Well, I mean, I'm a ride or die Mirandy fan,
yeah.
So...
Right.
So for the people who are listening, that's Devil Wears Prada fanfic, and there's about 20 to 5 year age gap between those two. But it's just so good.
This is that way, like, there were just some dripping subtext scenes in the beginning of the show. And that's, like, a lot of the fics just stop. Because they don't have that much interaction, and, like, a lot of the main writers for the fandom wrote an AU. So it's like, once you've kind of written the AU, like, where do you go from here? Mm-hmm. And there's not, like, missing scenes you can do, or there's not, So it kind of fizzled. There's still some people writing for it, but it's not, like, a super active ship at the moment, but there's a lot of stuff that's been posted that you could kind of rehash.
Yeah, that's good.
It's definitely in that Mirandy vibe, except that Raven is, I mean, they're both highly competent, so if that's another thing, like, they're equal, like what we were talking about earlier.
Oh, just like competence porn?
Yeah, but also, like, it takes away some of the age gap thing. Like, the consternation around age gap a lot of times is like, oh, you're immature, the younger one, or, whatever. They're both, like, highly intelligent and crucial for everyone in the show's survival. Like, the doctor, of course, highly crucial. The one who's, like, doing all the engineering and complicated things, highly crucial. So they're sort of on equal footing in that way, which is always, to me, like, where's the common ground?
Yeah.
And having competency as your common ground is like, yeah, give me more.
Yeah. So what's your next story?
Okay, the next one is called Chaos Theory. It's actually a series by, and that is terrible. The series itself is, like, over 400,000 words. It's a massive series. Another, like, interestingly written one, so this is for Person of Interest, which we talked about above. In the Christmas fic ones, this is Root and Samin Shah, also known as Shoot. This has, like, 4 different parts, but the really cool thing is, like, the main story, the first part, is called Sliding Toward Chaos. And it's actually a teen-rated story. Like, it gets a little upper teen, young adult, like, as it goes on. But what the author did was any of the pieces that would be explicit, she created a sort of companion series called Feedback Loops. So when you're reading Sliding Toward Chaos, in the notes, it will be like, if you want the next scene, like, that is not fade to black, click here, and it takes you to the like, continuation of the scene. That's the explicit part. So it's kind of nice, like, if you don't want to read that and you only want fade to black, you can just read Sliding Toward Chaos and not worry about the other one. If you do kind of want to read it and then get these little interludes, you can just follow it straight from the story because it's all linked together.
Nice.
So I thought that was unique. I've not seen that done, really. And Fandom-y, when we were waiting in line actually to go to the shoot panel at Klexicon, someone wrecked me the story. We were doing, like...
Oh, cool.
Some fangirling and wrecking different things, and I hadn't been too much into the fanfic of the show because they ended up being canon pairing, and I tend to not read too much canon pairing fic. But it's nice to kind of get that recommendation. And the only thing I will say, similar to what I said earlier, just a reminder, like, this show has some violence. When these characters meet in the beginning of the show, Root actually kidnaps Shaw.
What?
And there's some, like, tied to chair... Well, Root ties Shaw to a chair, and there's some, like, interesting interactions, which you can kind of tell Shaw's enjoying. Mm-hmm. But she's supposed to be sort of being tortured, but I think at the same time Root knows she's enjoying it, so it's, like, a really complicated interaction. And that kind of dynamic, pain play and probably some light BDSM kind of plays through in the explicit parts of this story. They're not a generic relationship. They are definitely highly complicated, and there's a lot of, like, intellectual sparring, but also like physical playing, if that makes sense to people. But yeah, and then there's some violence in the show. Like, it's about preventing murder. Like, yeah. There's a lot of shooting up people and stuff, and that kind of translates to all the stories in that fandom.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what's your last story?
I know, I can't believe we're to the end. Okay, this is another series, and I read this sort of close to when I read Gone to the Dogs, which is the Maria Hill and Natasha story. So this is another Marvel one, and the reason I wrecked it is because it's 540,000 words, which is mental. It's written, the series is called And When We're There We'll Belong, and it's by Andy Beth 82, and she's been working on this series since 2015, sorry. So it's been a long time. She's extremely prolific. Like, her one-shot stories that are not like tied to a series are like easily 15,000 words. And she's a really good writer. So that's kind of my thing, is like, I was reading a ton of Natasha Maria, and then I saw this and I'm like, I don't even think I buy this. I'm not buying what you're selling on this ship. So this is another like highly poly story. Like, if you're not into poly, you can skip this totally. If you don't like reading FM relationships, this story's not for you. It's a Marvel story, so it's Clint and Natasha, which is, Hawkeye and Black Widow. And then it's also Clint and Laura, who's his wife, who shows up in Age of Ultron. And then Laura and Natasha, and then Clint, Laura, and Natasha. So it's all of them. It's not a V-poly relationship. It's like all of them together. And if you are interested in seeing like how poly families become poly families, this is a good fic for you to check out. Like, there's the Barton kids. So Laura and Clint have kids together. They are, highly considered in this story. They do feature prominently, so if you don't like kids in your fics, also skip. And it's sort of weird because I really don't care much about kids in fics, but I was highly interested in poly stories after I saw Professor Marston and the Wonder Woman last winter. I was kind of like in a lull with my Maria Natasha fics, and I was like, this is kind of interesting. I'm curious like how this is gonna play out. The first story in the series is heavy Clint Laura. That's why I say if you're not into FM, you're just not gonna enjoy it. But it's like, I don't know, as much as I love lesfic, like, we live in a hetero world, so I'm not like unused to reading like every major assigned book that you read in school is like, so I get people don't necessarily want to opt in if they're doing something on their free time, but it's seriously well written. So the first story is a backstory about Clint and Laura and how they come to be and how Clint gets recruited into S.H.I.E.L.D., which is pretty fascinating. And the next piece is how Clint recruits Natasha, and how, similarly to the Natasha Maria, Natasha comes with a lot of baggage. And so how he helps Natasha kind of work through that baggage, and how Clint and Laura provide sort of a family structure for her because she has no family. And her kind of reticence with being a part of a family because she has, as they like to say, a lot of red in her ledger. And so she feels a lot of reticence and just unworthiness to be part of like a loving unit because she has personally done so many bad things, as much as, it wasn't really her fault. And she was sort of brainwashed and programmed and controlled into doing them. So there's a lot of that working out. There's also a lot of just domestic fluff, cooking, taking care of the kids. I mean, it's long. You gotta fill in the story somehow. So if you like kind of just if you have voyeuristic tendencies, it totally fills that kind of vibe. Like, you are literally just bird's eye viewing on like this whole family coming together and building a life. So if you are like an observer, you like, watching at the airport and making up stories about people, this kind of ticks those boxes. Like, you're really getting the nitty-gritty of the Barton family farm life. And it's set predominantly on the farm. So again, it's really nothing to do with avenging and superheroing, other than it's highly tied, like the timeline is highly tied to incidents that occur in the movies. And so, like, if somebody gets injured in the movie, they come back to the farm injured, and it's, you know, how they're recovering. And when Clint gets taken over, his mind gets taken over, is it by Loki? Now I'm, like, having a really sad, you're a fan of MCU and you don't remember who mind took Clint. But you see sort of the aftermath of that, and you see Natasha helping him because she's also had, like, similar sort of mental programming and deprogramming. So it's complicated. It's a long story, but, like, if you want to get sucked into something, I really enjoyed the writing. And then there's a couple of content warnings. Obviously, you know, people get injured and shot, like, it's the Avengers. But there's also, like, a segment of the Clint Laura story that's about Laura's difficulties early on conceiving children, and later in the story she has a miscarriage. So if that's a no-no for people, then also skip that.
Yeah, that's good to know. I mean, that one sounds like it's long enough that you could just, that alone, you could cover that holiday period.
Yeah, I mean, my wife is a crazy fast reader, so depends on, like, how, and I just see people chewing through lesfic, you know, in the Facebook group and elsewhere. So some people are just really fast and voracious. So yes, to me, it took me, like, I don't know, a month and a half to kind of, like, read, you know, and I was telling you before we started recording, like, I haven't read the latest part yet, but I read through the first.
Is it done yet?
It's done as far as, like, she started writing after Infinity War and finished that, like, post-Infinity War piece, which is the one I haven't read, because for everyone who has watched that movie, you will know why. But the only thing, if you look on the series and you see, like, there's one collection that is, like, an open one, and that's just one-shots that she's adding that are, like, in the same universe as this story, but they're not, like, the main 4 parts are done.
Okay.
And then there's, like, a 5th part that she's just constantly adding, like, little slice of life kind of things as they come to her, I think.
Okay, so it might get another part, like, after the next one.
Yeah, like, I don't think she's done. Like, as many more movies as we get, I think she'll keep writing, like, this sort of family unit and how it interacts. I mean, this whole thing is, like, how their home life is affected by their work life, right? So it's kind of taking all the events in the movies and then putting it in the farm and seeing, like, okay, now what? Now, how do we... And then particularly for Laura, like, Laura Barton has become a favorite character of mine because of this story. Like, she is home with these kids while Clint is off doing whatever he's doing, and she's just trying to survive, and also, like, not telling people that her husband's an Avenger. Like, you know, it's complicated. So for single parents out there, like, you might really resonate with the burden that Laura carries in this family. The writing of Laura is really beautiful in this.
That sounds really good. I think that's all for this episode. Thank you so much, Mallory, for joining me.
Yeah, thank you again for having me, and I look forward to chatting with some people on Twitter about all these stories. Let me know how you liked or didn't like them, please.
So speaking of, and we'll put this in the show notes as well, but how can people find you on Twitter if they want some more recommendations or if they want to talk about these?
I'm at DataLover916, and I'm also in the Lesbian Review Facebook group, but I'm not as active on Facebook anymore for complicated Russian reasons. But I'm there. If you message me, I'll probably see it more. But I'm on Twitter a lot more than I'm on Facebook.
All right. Well, I'm Tara, and you've been listening to Let's Do Books. Remember to email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with your questions or comments. If you're an author who's interested in joining me on the show to talk about the lesfic you love or trends that have you interested, please let me know. If you've enjoyed this episode, please check out the show notes where you'll find a Patreon link for The Lesbian Talk Show, or you can just visit patreon.com/thelesbiantalkshow. Our patrons get exclusive content that no one else does, like bonus audio from the other shows across the channel and author interviews and all kinds of fun stuff. Don't forget to join us at the Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club, so you can talk to us about anything that you're reading and loving, including some of the fanfic recommendations from the show. You can also find me and all the other podcasters on the Lesbian Talk Show channel at our Facebook group, the Lesbian Talk Show Chat Group. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for the Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher.